This meeting is being recorded.
Done. You made it in time.
What?
You made it in time.
We're going to wait 2 minutes. He said Adam is on his way. They were racing.
He was walking.
That explains it. Not quite.
You could have offered to stop and give him a ride.
Yes. But then
No, we started at the same place.
Okay.
So I wanted to see which way is faster walking.
I think driving is faster.
I was watching my Instagram.
Speaking of, hello.
They were
Glad to
talking
see
about
you.
you.
Well, we're
No, I
actually
was-
talking about the lack of community spirit some of us have as families offer rides.
No, I said that we were having a race to see where.
I think the second. I think I'd rather like talk about community spirit. And that's so much better than I do. Thank you for asking. Yeah, you did. You did. Are we ready? I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. So glad you could be with us here today. We have a few items of business. Appreciate you coming short notice for a called meeting. And thank you to the auditor's office for advertising on time and helping us. Appreciate that very much. So, first order of business is to approve the minutes from the September 8th Redevelopment Commission regular meeting. I would entertain a motion to approve those. And a second?
Second.
I don't know why I'm writing it down. Everyone needs to speak into your mic, and you need to turn your mic on. There you go. When it glows green, we're good. All right, thank you. So I have a motion by Dan, a second by Jan. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay. Minutes approved. All right, next up is the introduction to the Residential Housing Development Program. You're up. Yes, I'm ready for you.
Good afternoon. Again, Greg Fitzloff with KEDCO. And again, Madam Chairwoman, certainly the Redevelopment Commission shall. in advance, I certainly want to tell you we appreciate you taking the time. We are trying to move these projects along as expeditiously as possible. There were some time issues that got involved in terms of getting this done prior to the end of the year so that we wouldn't have to go back and redo something after the first of the year due to state statute. So we're trying to compress this, and we really do appreciate the cooperation, et cetera. Second thing, I'd like to introduce a couple of other people that are here simply because they played and are playing major roles in these projects. First of all, Terry Sweeney, who is one of our new KidCo team members and project managers. Terry is going to be working on the South Shore project, obviously, as well as others. So you'll be seeing both of us at a lot of these meetings moving forward. And then Jason Haynes. Jason is the one of the town council members in Etna Green, and certainly over the last couple of years has really on a local basis been the driving force in terms of moving ahead with a project that I think at the very beginning, everybody agreed with wasn't going to happen, couldn't happen. And now we're actually to the point where, you know what, this is a real thing. And I have to also, I get wander back to a year ago, plus when Jan, you were in Joni's chair, and gee, are we going to have the Redevelopment Commission do anything? And well, the answer is, yeah, we hope to keep you busy in the very near future. So with that in mind, let me go back and do just a very brief history. 2019, identification that from a lot of area employers that we felt there was a strong need for additional employee housing in the area for both attraction and recruitment of new employees and retaining existing employees in the area. Result of that, the county, city, Warsaw Community Foundation, KidCo, commissioned a study by Zimmerman Polk Associates that ended up in the resulting study that showed a need for approximately 2,000 new housing units in the county by 2025. And that was based on 2019 numbers. We certainly expect if we did the same study now, we would see that have increased because certainly employment has increased. But at that point in time, we put together an initiative to begin the process of adding additional housing units throughout the county. And this meeting today is obviously a result of that. We actually have two projects that we can discuss today. And the first one I'll just mention is Etna Green. We have a 18.8 acre site in Etna Green, just immediately adjacent to the community park. For those of you that are not aware of the location, let me just pass these out so that you Johnny knows exactly where it is because I believe you've actually driven by it a couple of times.
Intentionally, yes.
Yeah. We have looked at that site. We have obviously met with the landowners as of Monday, I guess it was Tuesday, yesterday. We have met with the landowners and reached an agreement on the ability to purchase the property. We have begun the process today of creating a residential TIF for that project. We will go through this process of the residential TIF as state statute requires. We have met with some of your members and county officials to kind of set out a timeline to do that. We have spoken with your financial analyst, Baker Tilly, in terms of establishing a timeline and them doing their due diligence, the first of which was to determine that the project was eligible under the 1% rule, and they have done so and sent that designation to the state. Their next job, which will be to create a tax impact or fiscal impact study for each of the projects, which they will begin working on. The next step in the process for that project or both projects is actually to move ahead with a public hearing. But let me stop and go back to Etna Green again, 18-acre site, 18-acre plus site. We have done our initial due diligence by the engineering firm, which we have retained to look at the soil, look at the elevations, provide even a potential layout that is just that, a potential layout. We're looking probably at 35 plus or minus single-family residents in that area. We have identified the utility infrastructure that's adjacent to it. There is a bit of low property on that site, which again, we would need a retention pond anyway, so that doesn't bother us. It may be a little bit bigger than we have normally hoped, but, and some of that may actually extend onto the community park, but we've talked with Jason a little bit. We don't anticipate that being a major hurdle, and I'll certainly leave that to the engineering firms to really figure out exactly how to do that. But our initial engineering report indicated that it's quite doable. It simply may be a little larger than we would have originally anticipated. The town of Etna Green is actually working with USI Engineering in terms of a pathway through that same area, which we will build into this project as we move along. So we're pretty comfortable that we're doing what needs to be done in terms of pre-development. We do have a pre-development agreement and a memorandum of understanding with the town of Etna Green for this housing project, so they've been very cooperative in terms of moving things along. So all said, we feel fine, and as a reminder, since the town of Etna Green does not have their own redevelopment commission, they had asked this body to act as their agent, as their redevelopment commission. So they will go through, you will go through the same process on behalf of Etna Green up to the final resolution, which will go back to the town council, hopefully at their December town council meeting. Let me stop there and ask any questions. That's the schedule, yes. Yeah, yes. Yes. Second Tuesday.
Okay, you're stopping there for questions? Is that
Yeah,
what you
any
said?
questions on Etna Green?
Not necessarily on Etna Green. We did do, I think some things have been discussed. We did find out that what it would cost to redo the 1% test. That was a question I had. It's $1,000 max.
Right.
To redo the test. Okay. The reasoning for wanting to know that is because if this is pushed through with timelines, that would require called redevelopment commission meetings on November 29th, the day after Thanksgiving, and December 27th or 28th, which is between Christmas and New Year's. Availability of people would become critical at that point if we choose to move ahead this quickly. My first question is, do you have a developer that has agreed to develop the property? And do you have builders lined up?
We do not have a developer at this point in time.
Okay.
We needed to gain control of the property first. Now that we have that, our plan is to send out RFPs to developers between now and the end of the year. We have had two different developers approach us over the last 6 months in terms of their interest in wanting to know what the status of Etna Green was. So we're comfortable that there will be developers, but no, we have not chosen, and they in turn would either be the builder or would work to develop builders.
Okay. Second part of my question is the work that you've done so far. Would, if this were pushed out to where we had more time to get this approved and not have to try to come in on holiday weekends, because I don't know about most of you, but a lot of us have travel plans that we like to go see relatives in out of state, that would really confuse this issue. And I just feel like if we breathe along the way, this is really going fast. There's not a lot of time to sit back and ask questions. If we had a developer, and I realize you can't do that until you have control of the property, but my thought is we create these TIF districts. Couldn't we come up with the developers first and then create the TIF districts? Because we could use the fact that we're willing to do the TIF districts to encourage developers and builders. Or, I'm looking for feedback here. Or, I mean, does one have to come before the other is what I'm asking. I mean, is there a real push to get this in through the first of the year, other than repaying the $1,000 again for the 1% test? Yes, sir. Please, but I need you to speak into the mic up here and identify your name first. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jason Haynes. I'm with the Town Council of Etna Green. Honestly, the only thing that is rushing this is that $1,000, and I didn't know it was $1,000 up till now.
I didn't till this morning.
I honestly don't like the pace that we're having to go to get it done by the end of the year anyway. So I will have no objections with you
Thank you.
pushing this out. I don't want anybody to have to do things on holiday weekends and that sort of thing. And I haven't even looked forward enough to see whether I can be here for that sort of thing, so.
Oh, you'll be done on the 12th.
But I know Greg wants to get this done, and Greg's been working on this. We've been working on this for several years now, so what's a couple more months?
Yep.
It won't hurt my feelings any at all.
Talking to the mic, Adam, please.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm gonna be the microphone police person, I think.
I guess maybe Greg and Terry can give I kind of want to hear the counter argument of if you get some assurances from this redevelopment commission that, yes, we will TIF these. I know that's not the same as it being completed. Mm-hmm. Is that enough to go to a developer and maybe we invest the money into a Baker Tilly analysis to say, here is what we reasonably could think this could generate, and have that number and that and a developer in hand, and then kick off the TIF stuff? I want to hear the counter. I guess
I'll definitely hand this off to Greg.
yeah. What is the counter argument? And am I wrong? Am I wrong in that? And tell me I'm wrong, I guess. Yeah.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yeah.
Number one, I don't think it's my position to tell you or anyone else up here they're wrong.
We're okay, I'm
But you
okay.
know the
We'll figure out
relationship with the developers. And that's
A
what
couple
I
of
want.
things on that. I think the normal practice, and that's all it is, the normal practice is probably to create these TIFs so that everybody knows it going in. Warsaw certainly did it. Some of the other cases, Syracuse has gone through that recently, et cetera. But it's not a necessity. And I think we have told you, we have certainly told the town council in Etna Green that our role in this is to facilitate the process, not to dictate the process. Yes, our probably is to keep it moving along, but the last thing we want to do is push you to the point where you're not comfortable with what you have done. So in answer to that question, no, we'll work with whatever determination you make. And in terms of the developers, just like everybody else, sure, well, how certain are you? Well, they said they would. Well, what does that mean? The only thing I would ask is that they will not commit to anything until they have seen a commitment. We can begin that process through the RFPs, et cetera, and let them know, quite frankly, that it is the intention of to create that and offer assistance. Baker Tilly is doing the fiscal impact study based on your recommendation now, so they will have some of those initial numbers coming back to you, although that provides you with some guidelines in terms of what revenue is potentially available, and certainly is not a number that commits you to spend that money on the project. In fact, you aren't going to.
Right.
I would never recommend that you spend all of that money on that. But it's simply a case of to work it through. The only thing we want to prevent is a situation where we have a developer ready to go, wants to build and get into the ground next year, and because of any concerns about getting the TIF up and running, that we miss a construction season. Because that, I think, for the communities, for everybody, that's what we're trying to get to. And but again, if we look into the first quarter of 2023 and it's done by then, I see no reason that would be an issue. So if the preference is.
Greg, I want to apologize personally to you that I wanted to reach out to you this morning, but it's part of my schedule and everything, but laying out those dates and then checking on some of our conversations of what meetings can we combine and what meetings can we maybe have before to keep things moving. And a few of those, I've just come to the conclusion from reading the statute, like we have the APC.
Right.
I don't think we can go to APC until after we have the declaratory resolution. So some of this conversation, at least from my heart and in my conversation, because then Michelle and I sat down this morning and said, okay, where are the meetings and how does this all lay out? And so some of this is, my own, schedule and delay and trying to get all this thing together. And finding, so then, and then we have to have that second public hearing with regard to, before we issue the conformatory resolution.
Right.
And then that requires a 10-day notice and all that kind of go out, which is all fine and well, but that's going to be cutting it really close with the commissioners meeting, their meeting. Because if that's the case, then we're 10 days after the 12th, we're to the 22nd, it just keeps pushing back. And so some of that is things that, I kind of conversations with Michelle this morning of and then the other argument is, and you would be pushing back as well, is if we're at risk of Etna Green or the township next year not meeting the 1% test, or two, that there's going to be a significant increase in the value of that basis for the property value. And I don't think anybody's going to, with a straight face, is going to say that the property value is dramatically higher next year versus this year. Those were my thoughts. And, I kind of, asked Michelle about it a little bit and had some conversations just on the scheduling time things and everything. And, I guess it's your guys' decision. If Etna Green was pushing and saying, hey, we need to get this done, let's get Etna Green done and get it done for them, because they're kind of calling the shot on that. But if they, quarter Q1 of next year doesn't make a difference to them, then, you could push forward one or the other. We haven't, you didn't even let Greg present on South Shore yet. But
I know. I know. I just wanted to, at this point, introduce the fact that we can.
yeah.
And my question to you, I still have the same question, is that the prep work you have done, does this have an expiration date?
No, I mean, I would not be doing my due diligence if I didn't go back through it all when we do it Q1, but it doesn't
Right.
necessarily mean I'm writing it all,
Okay.
all
Well,
over again.
yeah, I just feel like personally, my comfort level, and we haven't gotten to South Shore yet, and I'm well aware of that, but if we have a developer sincerely interested in building the type of homes that Etna Green once built there, my comfort level on creating this TIF goes up dramatically at that point. But I worked for the building industry for long enough to know their windows of when they can do things and understand that they're at the mercy of the weather. But if we created this TIF today, it's not going to change anybody turning dirt over until the spring. I mean, that's just a simple fact. The ground is not totally frozen, but I don't know too many people who are going to go out there and dig a hole right now to put a house in. So, what?
They're still digging,
Well,
but I understand. My only concern is if we're looking for a developer and we delay this, which I don't necessarily disagree with you, if they've had a schedule and they've made commitments, does that push them out, that developer out, another 6 months down the road to take on this commitment? I mean, if they've already accepted some other commitments.
Yeah.
I would,
We aren't going to know that at this
Fine.
point, so there's no way to answer that.
but
and I would
doubt
say
it.
a comfortable cadence for this is 3 months, 4 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're trying to cram it in 2 right now.
Come on up to the mic.
My only concern with trying to get the developer first is making commitments. Right now, we haven't had the public hearings with Etna Green. I don't want to make decisions that we lock ourselves into before my public hearings, because that's what I've told all my constituents, is that we won't go forward until we have these meetings and let them, so I don't know how it works with these contractors, but I mean, if we try and get them committed to something, are we going to be stuck with a bill later on if we say, no, we're not doing this? I mean, that's the only thing that I would worry about.
Okay, so, Adam, can you give me, go ahead.
I was thinking, kind of thinking out loud, hadn't, is there a possibility that we, and I want to redo the notice and the timing and all that kind of stuff, but we move forward with a public hearing on the housing plan for Etna Green to give you, and we could reset that, now I'm thinking about it now as I'm talking, but that occurs in Etna Green at your town hall, and that's an opportunity for you guys to hear from your constituents of, here's the plan and here's the project. And so that you can at least get to that point as well.
That's what I want to do. I just don't want to, I worry even right now, this is going to be in Ink Free or the local paper, and I don't want people to think we're trying to rush something forward without speaking to the public. So
And
that's why when I start talking about contractors, I'm like, oh boy, we're,
They're just an integral part of this whole thing.
Got it,
Because if
got
we
it.
create a TIF district and it sits there and does nothing,
I mean.
then we all look like, why did we do that?
And I would pay tremendously for that, so I
Yeah.
definitely want to make sure that we're doing this the right way.
Okay.
I'd have to move.
So walk us through
Greg, do
the,
you think that's an all right idea to go ahead and, maybe it's not today, but we set a public hearing on the plan itself for Etna Green, because that would give you that opportunity, and then if you get tremendous pushback or something like that, then,
Yeah.
we're kind of
Again,
back where we are.
This initial public hearing is really on the creation of the TIF. It is not on the approval of the project. So there are going to be a lot of questions potentially at the public hearing about exactly what the project is, who the builder is, which we certainly won't be able to answer at any point in the future, and we won't have a final commitment from a developer and builder to talk to people about until after the TIF is created and after there's negotiations done and a development agreement in place. The public hearing on the creation of a TIF certainly can take place, and we can manage the expectations in terms of this is what we're thinking about, this is what our plans are. And I've been at some of those meetings and talked to some of those people in terms of, no, it's a step-by-step process. It's simply to have a public hearing on should we go ahead in terms of the creation of a TIF, which may or may not be used for a housing project in Etna Green in the future. And basically, it comes down to, gee, if we have it in place, we can move ahead. If we don't have it in place at some point, we're not going to be able to move ahead with housing projects. So I think that would be the message we would try and send to the public at that public hearing. It's a necessary step to find out if, in fact, we can do a project in Etna Green. So whether or not you want to, I guess there are two parts to it because of the people we have to notify, the public hearing, whether we can do that, then yes, that would probably be more beneficial to try and do that now, yet this year, to get that first public hearing out of the way. Also, we have initially scheduled meetings with the school board in both projects for November. And again, with your blessing, we can get those both out of the way. Those are not, those are simply to have them identify their acceptance, if you will, of creating a residential TIF in their school district. And honestly, at least in the one in terms of Etna Green, they obviously are aware of it and have no problems with it. So I would probably suggest, at least in that case, and I suspect also possibly in the other case, that if you don't have a problem with it, we go ahead at least to do those and get those out of the way. And then as you move ahead after the public hearing and schedule the meetings in an appropriate fashion between now and the end of the year and after the first of the year, we can certainly move ahead with everything else. And the Area Plan Commission, I suspect we can do the same with, you know, when we have that declaratory resolution ready, we can schedule that possibly in, January, whenever you think is appropriate. So we'll make it work. You tell us what you'd like to do, and we'll make it work.
Okay, so are there any time constraints? For instance, once you have the public hearing, then you have to do this within a certain amount of days? I know there's waiting periods, but are there any shortened timeline horizons?
No, it just goes back to that, you know, an additional certification from DLGF with regard to the 1%.
Okay, so we just have to go through that again? Okay. Okay,
I have a question.
yes, please.
Greg, does the size or scope of the TIF impact the decision of the school districts as to their support or lack thereof for the TIF? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and in some cases, I suspect it could. In this case, because we're only designating the specific area to be used for housing, it will not. Because they will still always collect the revenue they're collecting off it. There will be no new increase in assessed value, increase in taxes off of that property that would go somewhere else other than to the existing entities. So for them, it really has no, it has no difference or bearing.
So who's determining the size and the scope of the TIF? Is that at the recommendation of KEDCO?
Yes. It's specifically, we have kept that specifically to the boundaries of the property that is going to be developed. We have not extended that outside of the boundaries for any reason, simply because that has not been part of the request from the town, or in the other case from the developers, and we have no reason to expand those. If we were in a different scenario, certainly with commercial TIFs in the past, you tend to make those probably a little bit larger and extend those more. But in this case, it was really for that designation.
Okay. We haven't discussed South Shore yet, but a conversation that Adam and I had had previously, because that project could have a much larger impact on State Route 13, and because there is a retail commercial component to it and so forth, the discussion of, again, the size and the scope of that TIF, and should it be considered outside of the confines of the South Shore project? And so, you know, my question is when, I mean, again, I think we're the commission is a younger commission as it relates to having created TIFs in the past. I would have assumed that would have been a discussion that was had by this commission to discuss the size and the scope. So to me, I'm still trying to get a timeline in place, because if we felt that TIF should vary differently, be a variation of what you're recommending from KEDCO, but you're meeting with the school districts to discuss it.
Okay, and let me, and again, try and make sure we understand the distinction. The residential TIF would be on the single-family residential component of the project. Anything in terms of commercial or non-individually owned units would have to go into a separate TIF as a commercial TIF. And that becomes a second designation for this body, does not require school board approval at all. And you can, quite frankly, do that when you start, or you can simply keep expanding that TIF as you want, going through the process. Now, you can create a larger commercial TIF out in that area right away, with obviously notification of the property owners, et cetera, but you do not need the school approval specifically as this, and obviously you don't have to pass the 1% test.
Okay.
Okay.
But I mean, that's a very good point, because you may desire to do that with the commercial portion of it now or in the future, if you so desire. You certainly, on the old Highway 30 TIF, for whatever that, you know, you've kind of extended it out further without any specific projects in mind.
Okay. So do we need to discuss South Shore at this point? Well, I guess my main question for South Shore is, do we know what the developers and owners have in mind? Have they made those Hello, Terry, you going to talk to us now?
We'll bring Terry up here. If you flip over the maps that you've got to the other side, that's the South Shore kind of project area designation. And I will let Terry step in here and answer all your pointed questions.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for letting me.
You have to speak into the mic, Terry.
Hi. Thanks for letting me talk about the South Shore project. You know, the developers anticipate that, I think if you have the description, up to 160 single-family homes, about 15 for-sale townhomes, and 50 rental apartments. And then they've been in discussions with an apartment developer as well as an operator for the youth soccer area. And so they're kind of at a point where they're really looking for the TIF to be established and to be able to do some of the cost analysis of the utilities in order for them to move forward. Greg and I are meeting with them again on Friday to kind of lay out the steps that they now have to start going down that is separately from this TIF process in order to keep them moving along. And so, yeah, I think that's about where they are. And, you know, kind of, I'll just, while you're thinking and stuff, my thoughts generally on TIFs, you know, residential TIFs are a little bit different, but then I think it's important that what you're trying to do, hopefully, is set the table for the developers to come in and make that ground more attractive, because in the development universe, let's say in Northeast Indiana, there's lots of other parcels that might be more attractive. And so the more things that you have in place, I think the more successful you're going to be in attracting a developer and in a timely manner. You know, saying to someone, hey, we got this tract, and in 3 months from now, we might have the TIF. Why don't you come do this? I think is kind of, at least the philosophy I kind of look at as, let's set the table.
Okay, my hesitation isn't to stop
Okay.
the TIF from forming. My hesitation is, let's think about pushing it out to where we're not talking about doing things over the holidays.
Yeah.
Just because I'm not sure we will get quorum.
Okay, gotcha.
I'm not sure I'll be here over the holidays. Those plans remain to be seen. And I agree with Adam that Etna Green seems to be fine without pushing this through. I would think South Shore, if you're talking to developers and builders, December, January is not going to change anything.
Right.
I mean, the ground's going to be frozen, they're not going to be able to do anything anyway. So I'm just thinking, I mean, this is just my own personal thought, is that we should take a deep breath. You know, if we want to have the public hearing for Etna Green's benefit, because that's something the town of Etna Green wants to have happen, then maybe we can move forward with that part. What about South Shore? Do we think we need to move forward with that part? Or do we want to, I just don't want to expect people to come in the day after Thanksgiving and between Christmas and New Year's.
I think it's more of, and I think it's more of a characterization of, when do you want to give the green light to move forward? Are you giving the green light today to set the hearing November 29th and pack it all in at the end of the year? Or are you going to say, hold on, let's slow a little bit, let's start this up first part of the year, and we have, public hearing? But I almost, maybe I'm kind of retracting a little bit what I said earlier, but it's almost like, if you're going to have that public hearing, you're starting it forward, because as Greg said, they're reviewing the overall concept of a TIF and what it is and what the purpose of it is, and you're making a judgment call as, does this area warrant this or not? Is that part of the process? So it's kind of pushing the pebble over the edge once you start that, that public hearing process. And I'd say you just keep moving forward, if that's what you want to do. I think there's a general hesitancy of, it seems, this is my perception, that historically the county has done TIFs when they've got a project, not creating TIFs to create a project down the road.
Right.
Marcia's
agreeing too, that's good.
So that's a little bit of a different, and I think that's maybe kind of what you guys are running up against a little bit here as well. And that's not been necessarily, what we see across the street and elsewhere. But I think everybody kind of, that's your judgment call. I mean, that's where you're at here. You say, hey, and maybe it's some more conversations, as you guys talk with developers, if you get involved in these conversations with KEDCO and others, you might come back to us in January and say, we need to do this. We need to make the investment as the county to do the product first, or do the TIF first before we get the developer. Or you may say, hey, we can figure out what the numbers are, bring us a developer. I think that's.
Yeah, and I, again.
Talking to the microphone.
Thank you.
If we weren't being recorded, it wouldn't matter. We can hear you, but the video cannot pick you up if you're not.
I completely understand what you're saying, Adam. My perception will be that unless we have something at least done, not completed, but some action taken in terms of a commitment, we are going to have trouble finding the developers for the Etna Green project. Etna Green is going to be a bit of a tough project because of its location and its history. We have some people interested, but it's very specifically based on, we need to know there is going to be that public incentive. So I don't know where it comes in, but I would be concerned that we would lose out on potential developers because they went on to something else because they simply said, well, they haven't decided what they're going to do. And so if you're trying to wait for the developer to show up first, in all fairness, that would have already happened. They're waiting to see if, in fact, there's a TIF going to be created before they're interested in the project. It's the same discussion I've had with the town of Etna Green and other communities. I've said, folks, if they were going to show up and simply build houses, I think they would have already done it. They're not likely to do it because they have a lot of other options, they have a lot of other choices, and they're going, quite frankly, where the market is bigger. We're trying to incentivize them to come to some of those smaller communities which they have traditionally not been interested in marketing to. So no need to finish the process, but I would encourage you to do what you can to start the process. If the public hearings, if some other step in the process hasn't gone well and you decide to stop it at that point, at least we know that we went to that point. To start all over again after the first of the year, realistically, at that point, it's going to take 90 to 120 days to go through the process, at least in order to get it done at that stage in terms of the schedules. And then, we do really probably lose the 2023 construction cycle.
A couple of questions and comments. Michelle, I think, would be the person that I'd ask this question. Are the balances that have been generated by the existing TIFs, are those funds only able to be used in those TIFs that they represent? And where I'm going with this is, if we were to delay our process, but if we had Baker Tilly determine what kind of revenue would be generated in the creation of the new TIFs, if we had a developer that was ready to go, could we use funds that are already been generated in other TIFs, and then when the bonds are issued for the new TIFs, pay back? Does that make sense, or do I need to keep going? Because
No, you're fine. So those revenues generated in our existing TIFs have to be used surrounding or around those TIF districts.
Okay.
So the funds that we have available to have this conversation with the South Shore, that is an agreement between you and the commissioners with some redevelopment funds that we had set aside to get the start money for this, get the seed money, to get this program underway. And then if we get to a point where a bond is issued, then those funds would be repaid to the county commissioners. So I don't know if there would be other agreements with the commissioners. You would need to have that conversation with them as far as if there would be any funding to bridge those gaps in that time that we don't have that established.
okay.
Greg, I have a question. I realize that we haven't created TIFs until we have a project. That doesn't mean that we can't do it this way. I believe in other areas, and maybe you can or can't speak to them, but other counties have created it this way because they had, and then turned it over to a developer, and it's been somewhat of a success. Can you speak to that?
For example, probably the closest one that has multiple, well, I already mentioned here in the county, Warsaw obviously did it with their northern and southern TIFs several years ago, and before there were any projects talked about in that area. Wabash has created 5 housing TIFs. They have not got developers for any of those 5. Those are 2 that are just immediately coming to mind. I think actually Winona Lake had some development, but created some for areas that didn't have any. And again, really to encourage, and the idea of that is to encourage developers to build in those areas that you have designated are eligible and available for potential incentives, or where the community, quite frankly, realizes they may have to spend some money and they want to be able to generate those dollars.
So then when we did the residential market potential painstakingly for, I don't know, a couple of years, this was the direction that was recommended by everyone that was involved, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So if the town of Etna Green wanted to hold the Etna Green public hearing in Etna Green,
I have to double check on that. Yeah, I gotta think of it. Because technically, it's it's the redevelopment commission putting on the hearing.
Right.
Yeah.
So it may need to be here. But I don't think that would prevent them from holding their own public hearings. Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe it's leaving here and having some more conversations on scheduling that out. So maybe we're not having the hearing, November 29th, but maybe it's looking at having it after the first of the year and then rolling forward or something like that. So they can have those hearings. Ours is more statutory mandated for the residential TIF itself. So, well, there's 2 hearings, but yeah, 2 public hearings, so.
okay. So how many people are going to be around the day after Thanksgiving?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what.
How many people are going to be around to attend a public hearing the day after Thanksgiving? Is my first question.
Is that what the 29th is?
Yeah.
It's the Monday after.
Oh, it's the Monday after.
Oh, it's the Monday after?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to say, I didn't want to be around on the Friday after Thanksgiving.
No, it's not the Friday. Yeah, it's
Okay.
I'm sorry. It's the Tuesday after Thanksgiving.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
All right,
That's
so,
not the only time constraint. I mean, because there's a lot of people, and then even at the community level, that are gonna have to conduct the various meetings. And so, while that may be really
Right,
practical to
that
ask just this body, but I want to be mindful of, it's really compressed. And
yes.
I certainly don't speak for the whole commission here, but I would like to say that we would want to become proactive as a redevelopment commission to support future growth, because we see opportunities and so forth. But the flip side of that too is then to utilize the county's assets, time and the money, and then not have a project come to fruition. And so, I mean, that's the other side of the coin. So to rush through this without the certainty of a developer, I do think there's merit in slowing down just a bit to make sure we're doing it right. So I think there's a greater compelling reason to slow down rather than the fact that the meetings might be after a holiday.
I'm a little concerned that people are going to think we're rushing it because we're afraid of their input. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do know what you mean.
Yeah, that's valid.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have laughed. You didn't write that down, did you? No. She laughed, okay. I just envision headlines when I say things, and I'm like, okay. So I think I'm hearing a consensus that we want to just breathe for a minute and maybe slow this down a little bit, but not cancel it. Just, is that the consensus?
Well, it was said, right, that a more typical time frame is 3 months, or maybe 3 to 4 months, and we're trying to do it in 2. So could we keep it going, but,
3 months is comfortable.
okay, comfortable. So could we hit the start button now, but spread it out over a 3-month period? Would that, Greg, were you suggesting that if we were to do that, that might miss the 2023 building cycle?
No, if we were to start it now and it took 3 months, that would get us into late January, and that's certainly comfortable. I'm not at all, uncomfortable with that. I guess my concern was stopping it now and not restarting it until then, because then we'd come back in January, have this meeting, and have to give the 30-day notice for the first public hearing, which couldn't be until February, and then going through the process of meeting with the respective school boards, and then having another redevelopment commission meeting, and then meeting with the area plan commission, and then I think there's another 10-day notice in there, and then finally coming back to the body. And that all of a sudden, just in my mind, gets us actually very quickly, probably realistically, to May. And I think that's when I get concerned, because that's, the developers, obviously, if they don't have their projects going by May, they aren't going to do them in 2023. They've already committed. They're committing to projects for 2023 now over the winter months.
Okay, so the Baker Tilly fiscal impact study, if we put this, the first public hearing off and not do it November 29th or whatever, or even if we slow this down and spread it over 3 or 4 months, what effect is it going to have on the Baker Tilly fiscal impact study? Will they have to redo that?
They won't do that until we've had the declaratory resolution and it's passed through the APC,
Okay,
and that's why they need, and they'll tell you, they need 10 days. And
Okay.
it's the same as the 10-day notice requirement.
Yeah.
That's what
Okay.
they need.
When the last conversation with Baker Tilly earlier this week was basically to say, you were meeting today, and, anticipation was they were going to start working on it after this meeting. We can, Adam, if you'd like to, Joni, we can get back to Andy and just let him know, hey, hold off until then. Bluntly, they didn't have enough information on the South Shore study to really start on that anyway. But they will, we can certainly make sure they aren't doing it. It won't have any impact on that study, because I'm not aware that there's going to be any major assessed value changes, et cetera, on these properties we're talking about, so it wouldn't really impact that at all. If you want them to go ahead and do it now, they can do it now and get it over with.
okay.
Can
Michelle
can
has a
ask?
2:30 deadline.
Okay, can I ask one quick question? So to juxtapose the two projects, we say, we're really not going to get anybody for Etna Green until we get this done, for a developer. We're not going to get a developer for Etna Green until we get this done. We have a developer in the wings for South Shore now.
No.
No, opposite. Etna Green has the developer in the wings. South Shore, we don't know what's going on.
Who was the guy
Is
that was
that
here
right?
presenting on South Shore last time? Yeah,
Developer, not builder.
Yeah.
I said developer.
Okay, I'm sorry. Move on.
Okay, so if we have a developer that's, involved with South Shore at this point, is there any other data they need from us with regard to possible generation of, what we could possibly contribute that would help them move forward in this process?
Yes. But we can't get that data until they give us more information. The data that's done you have to have projected revenues. Projected revenues are based on the increase in assessed value, which is based on what are you going to build in that project, number of homes, price points, et cetera. And they have not decided that. That's what our Friday meeting is to do. We're in a little bit of okay, which comes first, but obviously Baker Tilly cannot do any kind of revenue projections until they know what's going on that. That's the advantage of the Etna Green, because that is single-family homes, and that is a designated number at this point, because that's what we're going to have built on that site.
Okay, we need to decide if we are going to publish these notifications of public hearings. We have about 30 seconds before the paper's going to publish them. So we have to decide if we're moving forward with this or if we're going to put it off a little bit. So I need a motion either to let these go through, which means that we're locked into having the public hearings for both on November 29th, Or do we have Michelle stop the paper by making a phone call so this does not get published? We have to make that decision now.
I'm available. I'm not opposed to having that meeting on the 29th, but if you want to delay it a month, we could. I don't want to delay it like 4 months. I would like to,
I think first week of the year, you set your public hearing for this public hearing.
Okay, cancel
and
the
move
ad,
forward.
please.
Well,
Okay.
you guys
Can we
need
do
to
that?
vote on that.
Right.
What?
Like, that's your decision. That's not my decision. You guys need to
No,
vote
I
on that.
think I need a motion to
So,
cancel the ad.
Motion that we delay the November 29th meeting to the first week of January of 2023.
Thank you. Second?
Second,
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
And we'll just adjust our timeline accordingly.
thank you. Now, sorry, but they gave her till 2:30.
Yeah, I understand.
To pull the ad, so I didn't want to mess that up. Okay, so now, when should we look at, the next possible logical step is doing the public hearing. So do we want to do that the first part of January? So therefore, when we meet, okay, but we meet November, can we do it for, do we have to do it exactly 30 days out, or can we do it more? Like on November
it has-
10th, when we met, could we say we're going to do it in January?
Yeah, that's fine. And then
Okay.
we'll publish the notice.
Oh,
for
good,
it.
okay.
It
I like it when the
again, that
calendar's
goes back
not
to
ticking so fast.
Allows us to breathe a little
Yes.
bit and to say,
Okay, so on our November 10th agenda, if we could please have choosing a date for the public hearings for Etna Green and South Shore. And the reason I'm saying it that way is we will know by then, hopefully, after your meeting with the developers, if they have some idea of what they're doing, and we will be able to get more information on that.
Okay.
Okay. I feel good about that. Okay. Yes, sir.
Two other, my understanding then would be, obviously, we will not meet with the Area Plan Commission until after the public hearings and after we go through the next steps.
Correct.
In terms of the school boards, would you like us to have those meetings with them as scheduled now, or would you like us to wait until January to do that?
I would like to hear from the Etna Green councilman how he feels on this. At the mic, at the mic. This is the only time I get a direct
The
traffic,
wrong
see?
chair to sit in. You should have sat in the.
Yeah, you should have sat right
Now,
next to
What was the
Michelle.
question? again?
Okay.
Do you want us to meet with the school board now, or wait until January after the public hearing?
Right.
I think the school board's already planning on us being there on the 14th of November. I don't, as long as it's not a problem to do it that day, we might as well just stay with it.
Okay, 14th of November, at what
Yes.
time is that?
7 PM, is that when the council meeting is?
Okay, I will try to be there. Okay, all right, so, very good. There, as far as I'm concerned, is your answer. Does anybody have anything
What
one
about
way or the
Wabash?
other?
South Shore, well, see.
No, I would hold off on that one until we find out what they're going to do. I just think we don't know enough to go in and ask them.
Well, and again, a conversation that Adam and I had, I'd like to understand if the pros and cons of expanding the scope of the TIF, which obviously would impact the districts in a different way, correct?
Yes,
It certainly would be simpler to confine the TIF district just to the South Shore development, but is that the best option considering its potential impact? I don't know when that discussion happens, but
well, you could always expand the TIF if you needed to down the road. I mean, it
It's
seems
a
like a pretty big
process.
project.
I mean, it's a process to expand.
Yeah.
A TIF too, you go through the same thing, which incurs more cost. But my question is, why would you want to expand the TIF? Or what are you thinking? I guess I
well,
just,
so Adam, maybe you can help.
You're just trying to capture additional increased revenue.
Well,
from
yeah,
the
and not only
tax
that, we don't
bases.
know the time frame before the TIF actually were to start generating income, if it's confined just to the South Shore development, whereas if it expanded to existing properties, we begin generating revenue right away. Winona, as an example, and this is what I was referring to, Adam, if you could speak to, they elected for the Raccoon Run to have a much larger TIF, correct? Do you know, or maybe Greg, you could speak to it.
Well,
What was
Adam
the rationale
certainly
behind
is-
that?
Adam certainly much.
Because we're capturing all increment in all the areas that we were able to capture, Tuscany, we were able to capture Stonehenge, we were able to capture, any new houses that go into Heritage Lake. It's just casting the net broader, but I think then is when you've got to look at, at what point when you cast that net so far, are you going to get pushback from your overlapping taxing districts? I mean, those are kind of the only thing with South Shore I was pointing at is it looks like there's some development going on just to the west of there. And is there an opportunity there? I'm just looking at it right now, but, is there an opportunity? I think that's what, Doug is kind of bringing
Well, I just
up.
want to ask the question because.
Yeah, so from a procedural
ask the
standpoint,
question.
when we pass the declaratory resolution, that's what's establishing, officially establishing the box of the TIF. So, you kind of want it what you want it to be. And there's a lot of arguments for keeping it exactly what we've got it, because it's kind of simple and straightforward and, again, it's not capturing more than it needs to capture, but then you also argue, could we capture a little bit more? Maybe there's some more development that goes on to the west or the south of there, that would help, increase what you could actually do with or the impact you could have with, that increment.
Well,
Very good points.
Yeah, and to see what's being proposed for the South Shore development, I cannot imagine that it would not have a beneficial impact to the property owners across State Road 13, lakefront and so forth. NDOT is, talking about, the impact on 13 and if they're having to change 13 to add turn lanes and things of that nature. It just seems that there are other properties that would be impacted by that development, and it seems like there might, we ought to be having a discussion, whether should they be included, that district, because they're being directly impacted by South Shore.
And I think you brought up some very valid points, which is another reason why we need a little bit of room to breathe to investigate those and see if that would in fact be, a wise move. The one thing that my hesitation is always going to be to create a district and then to build up an area that the town borders are then going to turn around, which has happened. And that is unfortunate. It's great for the county, but it's great for the city, or the town, but not the county, because then we lose that tax revenue of anything else that happens. So those are things I think that need to be investigated.
It's way too far away.
It's too far away.
All of it is too far away? Okay. Well, you can tell I know a lot about geography in
No, it's
Syracuse.
They'd have to annex everybody and their brother to get there.
Okay, so that's good. So would you be willing to take on checking out what this West development is and,
Well, we already have two that are,
okay, you guys are doing that? Who's doing that? Who decided to take on South Shore? That was me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you two.
It was me. Marcia's going, I don't know. Was it
Don't let it
you?
go.
But I wasn't alone, was
No,
I?
you and Dan.
Doug and I are in Leesburg.
No, you guys are Leesburg? Okay. Well, this is fun.
Why
I like it. It
don't
was
you
me.
pull Jan into make it a threesome instead of a twosome?
Group.
What were you doing?
2 point.
Oh, it would be a
2
quorum.
point.
I'm sorry, we can't do that. It'd be a
No, we
quorum.
can't do a quorum, no.
No.
Dan, you and I need to investigate this. How is that? Was that so much better?
I make a motion that.
Yeah, you make a
Not
motion
Jan,
to
that
adjourn.
Joni-
Okay, all right, so what do you need from us now?
We will-
November 10th, you're going to come back, I hope.
November 10th.
That's when our next
Oh, that's your
redevelopment
next,
commission
okay,
meeting is.
I was trying to get through.
I'm
next-
beginning to get worried that I got that date wrong.
No.
No.
November 10th, we will be back to see you. Again, to further the discussions in terms of a possible public hearing and moving forward. In the meantime, we will confirm with the Triton School Board that we will be there at their meeting on the 14th. They've asked us if, in this case, it'd be appropriate if Adam would send them the summary information as well as a kind of a sample resolution of what you would like. So he'd ask that, by the early part of next week if he could, just so that he can get it out to his board and they can see what's coming up.
And Adam's going, sure.
Yeah, I just,
Yeah, I think
the
that
last
will-
several conversations I've had with Adam, I have to admit, I am really pleased that you have retained Adam, because it's nice to have somebody to talk to that actually, so I do
We
appreciate
are
it.
very pleased we have retained Adam. Okay.
I'm not so
So
sure.
now Adam can think what he wants, but
already committed. It's
my
too late
comfort
now.
level has increased dramatically.
By
Okay.
2-1 vote, we're glad you did.
Yes, so. At this point, Adam, you're supposed to say thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your confidence.
Okay. All right, so we're good?
Yes.
Okay, and can you join us on November 10th? 1:30? And the press will be here?
I was going to say, I'm on vacation all the time, I'm glad.
I knew I was doing it for somebody, I just didn't know who.
Would you put that in the article?
Yeah. Do that, we did that for you. Okay, so is there any other business to come before the redevelopment commission? Since we're not adopting anything today? I really appreciate everybody, and I appreciate all of your input and your thoughts. I mean, it takes all of us and then some to get some of this done, so,
Thank you very much.
well, thank you for allowing us to step back and breathe, and yeah, I just appreciate that very much. And I appreciate Etna Green's input on this because it's very important. We want to do what you want, it's going to affect you far more than us. So at this point, I would like a motion to adjourn.
Also move.
Second?
Second?
All those in favor can get up and leave. Thank you.
The recording has stopped.
Never have to approve a motion to adjourn because everybody's going to get up.
Yeah, I've heard that, although I always do.
I know.
Yes, I sure can.